relatively short notice. Couple of things happened today that just made me feel I really need to change the schedule. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do the Barry Morphew episode Tuesday. I'll probably do that and then move both the Van Gogh series and the Barry Morphew to Saturday and Sunday, something like that. PW, good to see you. I'm glad you enjoyed that film. PW says she really enjoyed Loving Vincent. Patty, thanks for that. Nisi, we've got a new member from Arizona. Thanks for tuning in. Robbie Robin, good to see you here. Stephanie, as always, thanks a lot for being available kind of at pretty short notice, 2 hours. This is going to be really, I think, an interesting episode once again. I've got a few sort of treats to share with you. I'm going to be showing you some souvenirs and things that I brought back all the way from Orvez when I was there. Timmy, do you want to, Timmy? Come boy. I must try not to knock over these glasses of water and cup of coffee. With a dog on your lap, it's not so easy. And my desk is so cluttered as it is. So I'm going to be showing you some souvenirs that I got when I went to Orvez in May 2019. And then, of course, we're going to go through episode 5. This is really one of the, if there's a podium for the most interesting chapters and episodes, I think this would probably make the top 3, maybe 4th place or something. But it's definitely one of the better episodes, I think, in the series. We're going to be dealing with the family dynamics, not only of the Van Goghs, and also how the Van Goghs see and experience Vincent, but also the Gashay family. So that's really going to be quite interesting. We've kind of been speculating about, could Vincent van Gogh have developed a crush on the sort of 20-year-old Marguerite Gashay? Is that possible? Is it probable? And, as we go further on, we kind of want to be asking the question, are we moving closer to that being true, or are we actually moving further away? Are we finding supporting evidence, or we must be honest about it, are we finding things that tend to show that it's not likely, kind of thing? Kathy B, good to see you. Kathy says hi, Timmy and all. So Timmy's definitely had a quite interesting day. So I'm just going to give you guys another 5 minutes or so, and as a way to sort of introduce today's subject matter, I want to share something with you and ask a question, and then we'll deal with the answer to that question at the end of the episode, of the live stream, of the show, whatever you want to call it. So today I did something different. Those of you who follow my Instagram probably saw that. Any of you saw the last post I put on Instagram? Any of you have any idea what I did this morning that was different to the usual? Not sure how long I can wait for an answer. I don't know if some of you are heading over to Instagram to have a look. Timmy, what you doing? What you doing? Robbie says not seen it yet. Timmy, relax. Stephanie, as always, you're on the ball. Timmy, do you want some coffee? It doesn't look like it. Yeah, so I did a cycling race today. And so, I guess part of the drama going into it explains why I'm doing this live tonight. I actually entered a running event yesterday, Saturday, And so I entered online. I went to fetch my paraphernalia, and then I ended up not being able to sleep the whole night, and I eventually fell asleep at 6 o'clock, which was when I needed to wake up to go to the event. And then I just thought I don't want to have the same thing happen with the cycling event. I'd also pre-entered online. And so what I did was at 1 o'clock in the morning, I downed a bottle of white wine, probably drank 3/4 of a bottle like in 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And then I did sleep a good solid 4 hours. And then I mean, it wasn't obviously not far from ideal, but at least I got some sleep, and then I did go and participate, and it actually went pretty well. It was really a beautiful, beautiful day. And I felt stronger than I thought I would be, and I saw some friends that I hadn't seen for a while there. And that brings us to the point of it is towards the end of the ride, I was riding and my front wheel just literally exploded. It was like such a loud bang. I would almost say louder than a gunshot. It was such a loud bang that the riders in front of me sort of like almost fell off their bikes. That has actually never happened to me before. I've ridden a lot of races. I've got quite a lot of experience. I've had slow punctures. I've had faster punctures. I've had, where you sort of hit quite a big stone or rock or a crack in the road, all those sort of things. I've never actually had my tire, like just pop almost like a balloon, just like instantly. And but don't worry, it was at the end of the ride. It was sort of, I was sort of at the end of what I needed to do. But the question I want to ask you guys is, do you think that's like an accident? Do you think that's random? Do you think that's just like bad luck? What do you think about that? So as I say, it's something that's never happened to me before, and I've ridden a lot. I've ridden lots of races, triathlons, lots of training rides. I've had lots of slow punctures. I've had lots of experience with tires going down. And this was the first time ever that my tire literally exploded with a loud bang, right? So anyway, the question I want to pose to you guys is, do you think that's an accident, a fluke, something random? What do you guys think about that? Nisi says extra adrenaline, sweats that wine out. Okay. Karina, no, what I'm saying is that an accident or is it something else? Nisi says random act, if not typical for you. Stephanie says, are you okay? Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't ride any further. The kind of tire I was using, it's called a tubular. You kind of need to replace the whole tire. You can't just kind of repair the thing. And so I kind of had to walk, I had to get off my bike because of where I was. I didn't want to walk with a cycling shoe, so I sort of walked in my socks, and fortunately a father of another rider stopped for me and kind of took me home. So I did actually think of taking my phone along, but I was just like, I think I'll be okay. And then fortunately I was able to rely on the charity of strangers, but could have not turned out that way. Okay, so Stephanie says accident. Okay. Karina says, did it happen to anybody else besides you? No. I have been in transition areas in like when there's a triathlon going on, and all the bikes are set up, and then you'll hear bam. And sometimes it's someone who's busy pumping a tire, and sometimes it's just a bike will just the tire will just kind of explode like that. So I've I've sort of seen it and I'm aware of it. It's just never ever happened to me. So I want you guys to think about that, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And if you got that strange feeling of I've got no idea, that I've got no idea whether it's an accident or why it happened or whatever. I want to address that sort of confusion, that sense of question mark, of I just don't have any idea of what the answer could be. I want to address that sort of uncertainty. So if I forget to deal with it at the end of the episode, I'm a little bit tired. Just remind me, but hopefully I'll be on it. Okay. Karina says no idea. By the way, for those who don't know, Karina's in Austria, so we're kind of on the same time zone. It's about 10:15 where I am, I presume about the same where you are. Stephanie says, were these tires meant for the bike? Yes, they are. Okay, so I think I'm going to start off by showing you guys some stuff from Orvez that I brought back with me from when I visited Orvez in France, just outside Paris, when I was there in May 2019, so around about 3 years ago. So first of all, there's this, right? And this is just kind of a bag, a kind of a packet, right? And I think what I bought with this were things like this, things like, it's not that. I don't really have one separate with me, but if you can imagine this as a postcard, it's actually another brochure, but if you can imagine that's a postcard, and does that look like something you've seen before, right? So I think I bought a few of these sort of postcards, and they sort of came in here, right? And then what I did when I came home was I took all of this out of the packet, and I to sort of color sort of postcards of Van Gogh's artwork, but also black and white images of Orvez, sort of really old pictures. And then I put something like this together, which I have hanging right outside my office. I don't know if you can see that. So does that ring a bell? It's again the same pictures behind me. And there is the river Aus, Orvez sur Oise, the Oise River. You can see someone, I think, is doing their washing. There is obviously a winter scene. It's unfortunate that this is all in black and white, but there you can kind of see the thatch roofs, the original thatch roofs of the cottages, and it was obviously sort of a dusty roads as well, not tar roads, dirt roads and cobbled roads. And then there's a bridge over the river Oise. There's another one of Vincent's pictures. There's wheat fields with crows, and I think this one at the bottom is Chaponval, which we're going to deal with in this episode. It's the station where the Van Gogh family alighted to go to Dr. Gachets' house, I think on the 8th of June, 1890. So anyway, I got all of these, postcards and whatever from a shop above the Revue Inn, and this was the packet that it came in. So I thought I'd just share that with you. Then I've also got this booklet, which I got from visiting Dr. Gachay's home. It's kind of a tourist attraction, so this is what I got when I was there. This is the back of it, and that's actually another picture of Dr. Gashay's home. You can see it's like a 3-story, first floor, second floor, third floor. It's quite a tall little home, quite squat and tall, and doesn't seem like there's much of a garden, but actually there is. So it says here, La Maison du Docteur Gashay, right? And then inside, it's really quite interesting. We might actually go through this whole booklet in a separate episode, but there is some information about him. Are there any skulls here? Well, there's a skull. Remember, we were talking about skulls. And that looks like a cat. We're going to be talking about cats in this episode a little bit as well. There's another cat. There is a picture of Dr. Geshe, not a particularly good one. And this is, I think his son. That's Dr. Geshe's son, Paul, who's quite an interesting person in terms of the Van Gogh story as well. There they are standing outside the house as well. What else is here? I think these are just some of the other artists and artworks that they had with them, and then that's a continuance on that. Some artworks from Manet, Monet, and Renoir, and then just going on, and then there's that etching that we spoke about in the previous episode. So we could maybe go through, as you can see here, they talk about the 70 days. That's actually the subject of what we're talking about here. So we could actually go through this brochure. It's like a little narrative of its own. We could do that at some point as well. So I think that is about it. So I got this when I went to Dr. Gashay's house, and I actually went from the house and the garden to the church at Orvez, which is right by Vincent's home. And I seem to remember there were 3 quite pretty sort of college age, they sounded like they were Americans, who were sort of chattering. They were also at Dr. Gashay's house, and when I went from Dr. Gashay's house to the church at Orvez, which he also painted, they were sort of there as well. They'd kind of gotten there. So it was this weird feeling of, I mean, I was on my own, but it sort of felt like I was following them, even though I was just going where I wanted to go. This is that church that we're talking about. This is from a brochure which you could get at the Revue Inn, which is a museum now, but it's where Vincent van Gogh lived. And so you can see something there. I think it's, you fill in your details. If you want updates or whatever, that's, I don't know why, oh, it's a staple. That is the inside of the Revue Inn. I don't know if you can see that. Vincent van Gogh's room is there. It's at the top of a staircase. And then that's also the inside of the Revue Inn, you know, the restaurant. Sort of lacy curtains and so on. I actually ate there, I had dinner there when I was there. I actually sat right below the stairs at a single table where I imagined Vincent van Gogh may have sat. And it was kind of quite weird because I was the only person sitting alone, eating alone, and I sort of imagined Vincent van Gogh must have done the same, sat alone and ate alone, and, you know. I've also got this map of Orvez. We're going to kind of come back to it, but let me just show you very quickly. This is kind of the compact version of the map. and there you can see Van Gogh. What does it say? Statue of Van Gogh. There is where Van Gogh lived, and then the station is just over there. Station is just over there, and it's literally. Does it show it here? It's really a short distance. It's like 200 meters from Van Gogh's home to the station. And so it really wasn't a big deal after he'd been shot. Wouldn't have been hard to get him from his home onto a train to a hospital in Paris. He could have been in Paris within an hour. And remember, he had internal bleeding and he was suffering for something like 30 hours. So they could actually have quickly have gotten him to Paris if they wanted to. Why didn't they? I don't know if you guys can see this very well. I did post the same thing on Patreon, but can you see how strung out the village is? You can see it is like spaghetti following the river. The river sort of curls, and it does make a very shallow U. And then the village just follows the curvature of the river, but also the hillside. Can you guys see that? Okay. We're going to come back to this map in this episode. I've also got a few other things, but it's not really Van Gogh's Europe and that kind of thing. But I think we really need to get started with this episode. Just have a look at some of your comments. What did I eat there? I think I ate meat. I think it was some kind of beef. I can't quite remember. Yeah, so there was transport very, very close to where he lived, and I mean, obviously the inn itself is on the main artery. So one does have to ask, why couldn't Vincent have gotten proper medical care? Why couldn't he have been taken to hospital? Why did he die in his own bed? Why wasn't he taken for proper medical treatment? Bria's just joined us. She said, just finished dinner, I'm here. So Bria's joining us from France. Paddy asked, how long was I in Auvergne? 4 days, I think, 3 or 4 days. I spent 2 or 3 nights in Valondoise. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but you kind of have Chaponval here, Auvergne-sur-Oise here, and Valondoise here. And I stayed at Valondoise. I think I just booked my Airbnb too late because all the Airbnbs in Auvergne were snapped up. And then I bought a really expensive Airbnb at sort of Chaponval, quite close to Dr. Gachets' house. That was really expensive, and I think I only stayed there 2 nights. So it was something like 3 or 4 nights at Valondoise, and then I think 2 nights, maybe 3 at Chaponval. So I think it was a little bit less. It was about 6 days in total, something like 3 or 4 days in the one spot and 3 or 4 days in the other, something like that. Okay, so in today's kind of episode, we're going to deal with this chapter from Van Gogh's finale, right? But this is a book by Martin Bailey, art expert, and we're dealing with chapter 6. It's called Family Visit, and the image he's got beside the chapter is this church. And I took quite a few photos of it. Those on Patreon will have seen the photos that I took of it. And the amazing thing is, in reality, the real life church does have these quite exaggerated lines. So this is a lot more true to life than you'd actually imagine. it kind of seems like a cartoon of the church, but when you see the actual church, the lines are very similar. And so he starts off saying, under family visit, he quotes Van Gogh's writing, "Now the color is probably more expressive, more sumptuous." And think about color as an expression of Van Gogh's mood and feelings and emotions. And so if that's true, then he's being more expressive and more sumptuous, which is another way of saying his feelings are becoming deeper, his emotions are becoming more expressive, more sumptuous. It's almost like someone is becoming happier, almost like as spring turns to summer, that feeling of being alive. I must say, I felt that today. Riding, I've kind of been in a sort of semi-lockdown mode for a really long time. I haven't done cycling races with a lot of people for quite a while, and so it was really nice being with lots of people and being out in the fresh air, and just an absolutely beautiful day. And of course, it's rained here a lot. It's summer, and the fields are really green. It was really a lovely experience. And so the sunshine and the green and the blue sky does is it makes you feel happy. I really did enjoy today. It was a really nice day. And I think because it was such an enjoyable experience, even my tire exploding was just like, you know what, I've had a great day. And it didn't really, although I was disappointed, it didn't really bother me. And next thing, someone actually picked me up. So I didn't really even have time to feel very blue about it. I wasn't even asking for a ride. Someone just stopped and, gave me a ride home. So, just to kick this off, can you see what I've written over there? Can you see the word I've written over there? Can you make it out? Nisi says it's harder to be depressed in such beauty. That's true. Stephanie says she can read what was scribbled there. Stephanie, are you still using neat post-its and not writing anything in your book? Karina says the painting of it looks like the church is moving somehow, like seen through a haze of summer heat, especially with that deep blue sky. It's an interesting interpretation. Okay, let's make a bit of space, right? I don't want to knock things over here. Karina says, I've seen the Patreon post, my lips are sealed. Okay. Stephanie says, I have highlight tape and I write on the highlight tape. That's the right way of doing it. I mean, definitely the right way of doing it. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with the crucial family dynamics of the Van Goghs and the Gachets. Bear in mind, it's how the Gachets experience the Van Goghs, but it's also how Vincent acts around his own family and just what he does and also altogether what they experience. Are there tears? Are they arguing? Are they complaining? Are they unhappy? Are they expressing concerns about money? Are they, looking at their watches like, wow, I can't afford to be here for much longer? Is there tension? Is there, what do you call it? Is there unhappiness or whatever, kind of what's going on kind of thing. So on page 63 of Martin Bailey's book, it kind of kicks off. Chapter 6 documents the interesting and insightful family visit of Van Gogh's brother Theo, his wife Jo, and infant son Vincent to Orvez. They had lunch in the garden with Vincent at the Gashay home. Essentially, they were eating in the setting of the portrait of Dr. Gashay. In terms of context, what's interesting is that just one day after sitting for his portrait, so just think about this. Dr. Geshe sits for his portrait, and the very next day he gets on a train to Paris and is back to work, like working as a doctor in Paris. And as far as I understand, he sort of spent about half the week working in Orvez, so he would attend to patients in the little village and I guess in and around there. And then the rest of the week he would be in the city where he had to practice there as well. And so while he was in the city, the day after he'd sat for this portrait by Vincent van Gogh, he dropped in at the Boussard and Valadon Gallery in Paris, which is where Theo worked. Now, Theo is an art dealer, and of course, Theo is very, he's keen to sell his brother's work, but he's also concerned about his brother's health. And so here's the doctor. The doctors come to say hi. And so this is only their second meeting. The doctor now has the opportunity to kind of say, okay, this is my diagnosis. This is where we are. This is how your brother is doing, right? And it's also a way for us to check ourselves. Thus far, I've been saying, wow, Vincent seems happy, healthy, fine. He seems a picture of health. Well, now we're going to get an assessment from the doctor. Do you think that assessment is going to agree with what I've been saying so far, what we've been observing so far, or do you think it's going to be, this guy is really sick, he needs to just stay in bed, he needs to leave Orvez and kind of go back to Holland and just retire? It's too much stress for him. What do you think the assessment is? Bria says Stephanie's note-taking skills are top-notch. I remember you saying something like that on Patreon as well. Okay, so Bailey describes Dr. Gachay's assessment of Vincent as surprisingly optimistic. Wow, okay, so Dr. Gashay is optimistic about Vincent's condition. Now, think about what we're talking about. He's supposed to commit suicide in a month and, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks. So in about 6 or 7 weeks, he's supposed to commit suicide, but his doctor is saying, I'm actually quite optimistic. I'm pretty happy with what's going on, right? In fact, he went further. He didn't just say, he said, I actually think that he's cured. In other words, that he's fine, that he's healed, that he's healthy, right? Not that he's getting better, but that he's cured, past tense, right? So you might say, well, how do you know? Well, how we know is Theo, you can imagine, was pretty happy to hear this news. And so he passes it on to his brother. The doctor tells Theo his assessment of Vincent, and then Theo passes it on to his brother directly in a letter, so it's documented, and he says, Dr. Gashay thinks you are cured, you're healed, you're healthy. And not only that, he said he saw no need for it to recur. In other words, so you might say, well, today he's healthy, today he's fine. Well, what about tomorrow? What about a week from now? What about 7 weeks from now? And the doctor's saying he is so fine that he's out of the woods. No need to worry about it, right? And Bailey, of course, the guy who wrote this book, is quite surprised, I think, by this optimistic diagnosis himself, which is why he says what Dr. Gashay said was surprisingly optimistic. I'm not that surprised. I'm not that surprised that it was what it was. I mean, Vincent van Gogh doesn't seem sick, so why would one be surprised? And I suppose most mainstreamers, most people subscribing to the mainstream view that Van Gogh was whatever, sick, troubled, suicidal, depressed, would be surprised by what Dr. Geshe said. What we have is the doctor's expert assessment of Van Gogh's health, that's his mental health and his physical health, about 6 or 7 weeks before his death. He's been given like a clean bill of health, right? 6 or 7 weeks before his so-called suicide, a doctor, not just somebody, it's not like a passerby says, oh, I saw him, he looked fine. It's a doctor. His doctor. And he's saying Van Gogh is cured, is healthy, and unlikely to suffer any kind of relapse. And so did he suffer a relapse? Did he go from being very happy and healthy to suddenly something happened? It's possible, but let me bring you back to what happened to me. I rode my bike today in a race and the tire exploded. Is that just something that happened? Like, wow, it just happened, or is it something else? Is it the same with Vincent van Gogh? He spends his 70 days painting and is visiting people and is forming new friendships and relationships. He's becoming part of a household. He's kind of becoming part of a community. He's getting somewhere with his art. He's actually literally painting some of the best art of his life, and anything like that's going to make an artist feel pretty good about himself. He's going to get up in the morning feeling good, right? So did all of that happen, and then there's this sort of random thing where he cracks, where he snaps, where whatever, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about. So I've kind of been calling for this diagnosis all along, that Van Gogh would not be capable of the output he was producing in these last 70 days, not just to where we are now, which is around about at the 2-week mark. He would go on to paint every day for another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks. And he wouldn't be able to do that if he was anything less than mentally and physically healthy. Now, I've already told you, I wanted to do a running race yesterday, and I didn't pitch up. I entered it, but I didn't do it. Why? Because I wasn't mentally and physically in the right place. I hadn't had enough sleep. I was extremely tired. Not that I wouldn't have been able to do the thing, but the point is that there's a bit of disruption going on, and I am trying to sort it out. Today at the cycling race, when I told this guy next to me, his name is Mark, that I do drink 3/4 of a bottle of wine just to sleep. Although he laughed, he said his son's going through the same thing. I think his son's a gamer or something like that, and his son's also something like goes to sleep at 3 o'clock every morning, and he was just saying how hard it is to lose weight, to gain fitness when you up at night and there's nothing to do, and then you eat and you watch TV, and you can't really exercise at night as well as you can in the day. The point being that he was quite, he kind of understood where I was coming from. He was like, that's really unhealthy, but I know exactly what you're going through because my son is as well. And so how do you get out of that? Well, you've got to, first of all, realize that it's a problem and it's serious enough to do something about it, which is kind of why I'm also doing this live right now, because I can't kind of afford to do lives at the time that suits you guys, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, then it's sort of starting at 11 o'clock at night for me, or midnight, and then it totally messes up my sleep cycle. And now it's becoming a priority to take part in these events. What I'm trying to get at is, if you just take me, and I'm actually feeling a little bit sick from lack of sleep and trying to train with lack of sleep. Sometimes when you've got a little bit of phlegm and it's not clear, right? It's often a sign that you're not 100% healthy. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to produce content, right, on YouTube and live streams, and I'm not able to do it because I'm not completely resting properly, and I don't have all my SHIT together. Vincent van Gogh was able to paint a picture a day for 70 days. You can only do that if you have got vigorous health, not like just a little bit of good health. It's not just like, yeah, he's a little bit healthy. You've got to be really healthy. You're sleeping well, you're eating well, you are in a nice routine every day, and you're kind of performing like a machine. He's pointing like he's painting like a painting machine, right? And if you look at the work behind me, for example, he's doing well. It's not like he's producing garbage. It's some of his best art. And that brings us to kind of the bottom line with this is, my contention is that Van Gogh was murdered not because there was something faulty with his libido. So in other words, if you're making the claim that he wasn't healthy, you could say everything about him wasn't healthy. He was tired, he was mentally troubled, he was depressed, all those things. And so he wouldn't have had much of a libido. It's like, do you want hi Vincent, do you want a girlfriend? No, I'm feeling, no, I don't want a girlfriend. And so now you say, but he has a very healthy Vincent who's painting pictures every day, and he's like this Olympic champion of painters. Do you think there's anything wrong with his libido? I mean, he would get up and walk out and, walk into the countryside, and all these scenes that he's painting, like the one behind me, he has to walk to. And then when he's walked to that scene, he's got to walk further to another scene because he wants another view. And then when he's done that, he's got to walk to another one. It's not like every day you just go to the shop around the corner, or every day you just go and have a cup of coffee somewhere. Every day he's got to go somewhere else, somewhere further, which has got to be, it's quite rigorous. And, I walked around Orvez myself, and it's not level. It's not like you just walk from A to B. It's very up and down. The chateau that's there is kind of on a hillside, and getting to Dr. Gashay, you're going up and down. It reminded me a little bit of Portugal, Praia de Luz, the up and down nature of that resort as well. Not quite as much, but it was really a sweaty exercise getting from the train station at Gare de the station at Valandoise. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, Bria. Have you ever been to that station? Anyway, getting there to where I actually stayed, that was quite a trek. It was quite a trek. And so the question is, so if he was so fit and strong to paint the way he was, then surely his libido was firing on all cylinders. And I think that if you're seeing those words should be highlighted in bold. In the last 70 days of his life, we're now kind of at the last 55. Vincent van Gogh's libido is firing on all cylinders. Well, what's he going to do about it? Right? Let's just take some of your comments here. Nisi says, was he painting out of happiness or madness? I would imagine madness would bring on incredible brain fog. I don't think you can sustain mad inspiration for very long. I think that kind of thing, it's almost like being on a drug. Whereas if your inspiration is authentic, you can keep it up. You can be consistent. Stephanie says he's getting up before sunrise to go to paint. Depression often keeps one all day in bed. I mean, absolutely. Very depressed people who are basically suicidal, getting out of bed is a major thing. It's like, I can't. The idea of a day is just too much for me, and I don't want anyone to see my face, and I can't go out there. I just can't, kind of thing. And yeah, you've got this guy who knows exactly what he wants to do, and he's doing it, and he does it day after day after day, and he's so passionate in what he's doing. He's so effective, and he's doing so well that his family come and see him to kind of see, wow, let's say you seem to be doing really well. It's almost to celebrate this kind of occasion. Nisi says, I'm chronically ill. After 30 years, I find writing very difficult. So only when I'm my best self am I able to do certain creative tasks. So I can tell you as a writer, Nisi, my biggest difficulty was dealing with sleep. So I could write phenomenally fast and well, but then the problem was turning the engine off. Like I could also write the whole day, but the problem was you get to the end of the day, your body's absolutely exhausted, your back's aching, your eyes are hurting, and you've actually been writing through the night. You may have been working 16, 18 hours, and then now it is time to stop. It's not so much time to stop because you want to stop. It's time to stop because you can hear the birds singing and you need to rest, and you might be getting chest pains. It's like, I need to stop, I need to sleep. And then you can't sleep. And then the problem with that is if you don't sleep, or if your sleep quality is really bad, then going into the next day's writing, you're going to not be able to concentrate. So you've got to keep that engine kind of functioning, and also have the discipline to stop the engine, to say, okay, that is a nice block of work that I've done, but although I'm functioning really well, the engines are turning and everything, I actually need to stop the oil tanker, the steam train, and it's not so easy to do that sometimes. So Vincent van Gogh actually had, he was in the zone. He was painting, and then he was tired enough and able to sleep, and then get up the next morning and do it again and again and again and again. As Stephanie says, dedicated. Estienne Kowalinski, good to see you here. Thanks for that. I'm glad you're all right. That must have been disconcerting. I believe in Jungian synchronicity. The exploding tire was speaking to you. I do think it is really interesting that the tire exploded when, I'd finished my lap, and I'd kind of said to myself what I was going to do, and I was kind of on my way home to sort of out of the race scenario when it happened. So that definitely was quite interesting. Terry says, doing any tiny task is mentally exhausting when one is depressed. That's true. Yeah, Nisi says sleep is number one, in total agreement, anxious brain. Okay, so I'm just trying to make the case that Vincent van Gogh's libido, if he was so healthy, his libido had to be pretty good as well. And so On page 63, as I mentioned earlier, I've scribbled the word ASSHOLE next to the margin of the first paragraph, and that's a reference to Dr. Gashay. Why is it there? Well, because when Dr. Gashay meets Theo in Paris, he only does so briefly. He sort of goes into the gallery, and this is actually quite an important moment. It's important in terms of art history. Okay, so doctor, tell us now what you think. Doctor, what is going on with Vincent van Gogh? So this is a really important moment. It's like all the art experts are sort of holding their breath. You know, what is the expert opinion in 1790, June, of Vincent van Gogh? So that's the one side of it. The other side of it is Theo's brother, Theo is an art seller and is at work, and here comes this really prestigious client. He's a guy who has the resources to buy art. He has a lot of connections to artists. It's quite a good client / friend to have, right? It's an important, influential client / friend to have. And so Dr. Gashay coming into the gallery and even just talking about Vincent's work. By the way, your brother just painted my portrait. He's so talented. Just that, given that Theo's sitting with a whole truckload of unsold paintings in his home, you know, it's like floor to ceiling, they're all over the place, under beds, everything. Dr. Geshe coming in there, and you might have another client overhearing what he's saying, or someone else in the gallery overhearing what he's saying. This could be a massive breakthrough for Vincent van Gogh. Bear in mind, you might say, no, not really. Bear in mind, the portrait of Dr. Geshe would go on to become the most expensive artwork ever at the time it was sold. And so yeah, you have the doctor himself. And this is an opportunity to give credibility to Vincent van Gogh. Badly, sorely needed credibility to say, this guy can paint. This guy painted me. This guy is really good, right? And bear in mind, the meeting isn't like in a park in Paris or a coffee shop or a brothel or a bar or a library. It's in a flippin' art gallery. It's in an art gallery. And so what do galleries do? They sell the art of artists. And what is all this fuss about? What is Vincent doing by going out every freaking day painting? Why do you think Vincent painted this painting? He wants to sell it. He wants people to buy his art. It's not just that he's painting the painting to stick under a bed. He wants to sell his art. So yeah, the doctor goes to the gallery, and now it's his chance, first of all, for us waiting on the other side of history to hear, okay, how is Vincent van Gogh? Does he have does he have epilepsy? What is going on? Let's hear it. On the other side, now you can actually provide a breakthrough for Vincent van Gogh. You're his friend. He's just painted a portrait that's going to be world famous. Are you going to kind of give Vincent a sort of a push and help him get where he needs to go, right? And then what happens? Instead of giving Vincent a solid reference, instead of just going to a little bit of trouble to say, Theo, your brother is awesome, the good doctor doesn't have time. And he's there briefly, and then he skedaddles. Sorry about that. And that's why I've written the word ASSHOLE, and I write the same word again in the same chapter. And bear in mind, Vincent van Gogh kind of expressed the same sentiment. You might say in a very polite way, instead of using that word, that Vincent van Gogh initially had an unfavorable impression of Dr. Gashay. Well, you could also say, yes, because he was a, you know what. And I'm kind of trying to make the case that maybe he was a you know what, which is why he committed murder. So 4 days after this meeting, so although it's a brief meeting, something good does come out of it. 4 days after this meeting on 8 June 1890, Theo, Joe, and baby Vincent board a train to Auvers-sur-Oise. They arrived there on the 8th of June 1890, and it's a Sunday. It's a Sunday. Karina says the green monster, jealousy and envy. Yeah, he wants to earn a living. Think about it. He's 37 years old. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have a wife. He doesn't have a family. He doesn't have a child. He doesn't really have a home. Do you think he wants any of those things? Do you think he wants to belong somewhere? Do you think he wants at least to be respected for what he's doing? And he has a respectable doctor, and all the doctor has to say is, this guy's good. And have other people hear it. So this is where it gets pretty interesting. So Dr. Geshe invites the Van Goghs, that is Theo, Vincent, Joe, that's Theo's wife, and baby Vincent, to his home on a Sunday. What does that tell you? It tells you that he's not working on that particular day. It tells you that he sort of socializes with other people on that particular day. I also kind of have a sense that Dr. Geshe doesn't really have a lot of friends. You don't really hear that when so-and-so went to visit, somebody else was there, that there's this kind of figure who comes up again and again and again. Oh, that is Dr. Gasay's pal. What's his name? Fred. Fred, as I arrived, Fred was just going out. Oh, when I got there, Fred brought some pastries. Oh, when I got there, Fred tripped over the cat and blah, blah, blah. You don't really hear about anybody else. And so you've also got to ask, if Dr. Gashay and Vincent van Gogh became friends, and Vincent van Gogh doesn't have an ear and he's a bit of a tramp-like figure, he's a bit of a loser, and the doctor's a doctor, why does the doctor not really have friends? What's kind of going on? Right? Do you get what I'm saying? For the doctor to become friends with Vincent van Gogh probably means he didn't have friends to begin with. Where are these other friends? Where are these other people? And you'd think that if he did have a lot of friends, they'd be kind of hanging around the house and Vincent would meet them as well and write to Theo, hi Theo, I met Mike again, and yeah, he vomited over my art, blah, 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 blah. You just don't hear that. It seems like his only friend was Vincent van Gogh. So what is actually going on? By the same token, you could say, we're Van Gogh's friends. Van Gogh had a few friends, not really many, but he had a friend a friend in Paul Gauguin, and that friendship was a bit rocky. And he had a friend in Emile Bernard, but he wasn't like surrounded by friends either. He was quite a lonely guy. I think that's been quite well established. Also because he moved around. But I think it's really important to highlight Sunday as the day that Dr. Geshe invites people over. And then, did you know that the day Vincent van Gogh got shot was also a Sunday? And I'm kind of making the case that Dr. Geshe is the one that shot Vincent, and it happened on a Sunday. Vincent van Gogh got shot on a Sunday. That's the day Dr. Geshe is in town, he's around, he's available, he's socializing. That is the day he socialized previously with the Van Goghs, plural. And by the way, later on, Dr. Geshe invited Vincent by himself for lunch. We're going to deal with that as well. Guess what day that was as well? Sunday. So here you have 3 Sundays. June the 8th, we'll deal with the other one, and then July 27th. There are 3 Sundays. Weren't all 3 of those Sundays to do with Dr. Geshe? Well, we know two of them were. What about the third? So my question is, isn't it possible that Vincent was a guest at Dr. Gashay on Sunday, July 27th, the day he got shot, just as he was on June 8th, about 7 weeks earlier? The other thing to say is whether Dr. Gashay was right or wrong in his diagnosis of the Dutch artist. In other words, whether he's right or wrong about him being healthy. He did make that diagnosis relatively early in Van Gogh's summer epic. The first week in June was barely 2 weeks or 14 days into Van Gogh's 70-day finale. We're just at about 1/5 of the way through Van Gogh's summer epic. We're just about 20% into that timeline. And the doctor may actually not have known or understood all there was to the Dutch artist. What I'm trying to say is, if Van Gogh was sick, the doctor may just, if it was like a subtlety to his condition, the doctor may have just missed it. But equally, if there was an aspect to Vincent van Gogh's personality, bear in mind, we dealt with this in the previous episode. If Vincent said to Dr. Gashay, hey, this is quite a cool paperback, you should read this, then early on, before the doctor had a chance to read it, he wouldn't have a very good idea what the sort of reading material was that he was being given, but later on he would, right? Does that make sense? So Dr. Gashay may not have known or understood all there was to the Dutch artist. This is with regard to Vincent's health, sure, but also his other tendencies. What other tendencies? 2 weeks in was also before the doctor got stuck into Vincent's, as I say, somewhat debaucherous reading material. What did he think about that? He may not have been too worried about that in terms of its own merits. Okay, you're reading this, or it's like what do you watch on Netflix? But in terms of the greater context, well, I've got a daughter who I'm leaving alone when I go to Paris. So anyway, this is the situation. Vincent's brother, sister-in-law, and nephew alighted at a station called Chaponval on the Sunday morning. And this is a picture of it. So I'm now going to do this thing again. Just take a sip of water. This is a photo I took in Orvez of a train passing by the station where Van Gogh would have alighted. And there you can see Chaponval over there, and there's a restaurant, and well, trains are still passing there to this day. Okay, let's go back. This is the same thing from a different angle. And that's further down the road. You can see these roses along the side here. And there's the sign for the area. That means the road of Chaponval, I guess. Is that right, Bria? Stephanie says Dr. Gachets' medical colleagues saw him as a good painter and a mediocre doctor. That's interesting. That is really interesting. Where did you see that? Thanks a lot for the $10, Stephanie. So you kind of get the idea that Dr. Geshe is a bit dodgy. I mean, if his own colleagues think you're a mediocre doctor, did he know that? Did he know that he's a mediocre doctor? Now, think about that, like in terms of Vincent van Gogh. Do you think Vincent van Gogh thought of himself as a mediocre painter? Because that can be a heartbreaking thing for an artist to endure. especially if you're a good artist, but people think you're not a good artist. And I kind of get that quite a bit. I don't think I'm a bad writer or researcher. I don't think I've done bad work on the John Benet Ramsey case and so on, but I kind of get a sneering contempt from other journalists who think they know more, but it actually turns out they're very ignorant. I've contacted journalists in terms of other cases like the Chris Watts case, and then you actually experience that absolute sneering contempt. And in this one particular case, I contacted a journalist, and I eventually just cancelled it was a long distance call. I just cancelled the call and just said, look, just leave it. I don't actually want to be associated with your publication, because you've got to educate them on something, and they think because they work for publication that automatically qualifies them, and that you are one of the trolls or one of the idiots or one of the I don't know what. And anyway, it's a situation where when your work actually is good but other people think it's mediocre, how do you get through that? But in this case, I wouldn't be surprised if Dr. Gashay was a mediocre doctor, and we're going to deal with him being a mediocre doctor when Vincent van Gogh is shot. How does he act when that happens? Does he act the way a good doctor would act? Does he render aid? Think about the Rust incident, where Helena Hutchins was shot. Someone is shot right in front of you. Whether you're a doctor or not, do you do your duty? Do you come to the aid of another person? Someone needs your help. Someone is in an emergency. But now you are a doctor. You have a duty to do certain things, right? Think about the situation with Alec Baldwin and Helena Hutchins, and now imagine Dr. Geshe standing there, and instead of it being Helena, it's actually Vincent van Gogh. What do you think happens next? Do you think Dr. Gashay calls for a helicopter? No. Do you think, in other words, that's an analogy for putting Vincent van Gogh on a train so they can go to a hospital so he can get proper medical care? Do you think he does that? No. Stephanie writes here, ironically, his artist friends reputedly regarded him as a good doctor and an amateur painter. Oh, is that in the end notes? Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so thanks a lot for that contribution. By the way, Stephanie is going to be co-presenting in the next episode. It'll be next Sunday. Unfortunately for Stephanie, there's not fireworks in the next, we're going to do 2 chapters. There's not fireworks, so it's really up to Stephanie. If she finds meat and potatoes, we'll deal with it, but there's not too much to talk about in those 2 chapters, but Stephanie's welcome to share her notes. But we are going to, in the next, in episode, is it 6, I'm going to be handing the mic over a little bit to Stephanie because she's also got the book to share what she thinks. If it goes well, we might do it again, and we'll see how it goes. But those 2 chapters really aren't full of fireworks. I kind of want to make it a little bit more interesting by having another face dealing with the story. Okay, so let's go on. When I changed my Airbnbs during my stay in Orvez, I went from way on the other side of the Revue Inn to the other side, the opposite side. So it's Valondoise is here, Orvez is here, and Chapanval is here. I went from over here, Vincent van Gogh's home is here, Dr. Gashay is here. I went all the way to that side. And so I was quite close to Dr. Gashay's house where I was staying. I was much higher up on the hillside than his home. also a lot closer to the river. And the Chaponval station was almost directly below my new home on the hillside. I've mentioned before that Auvers-sur-Oise is a village strung out along a narrow corridor between the snaking Oise River and a fairly steep ridge running alongside it. Chaponval is the first station before Auvers-sur-Oise coming from Paris. I think. I could be wrong about that, unless it's the other way. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So the Van Goghs alighted at Chaponval because it was a shorter walk to Dr. Gachets' home than from the station at Auvers-sur-Oise. Let's also be clear on that. Even today, as a tourist, you could walk from the station. But especially then, it's a compact enough town to walk hither and yon. And why I want to emphasize that is you might think Van Gogh lived somewhere, and if he wanted to visit Dr. Geshe, he had to make some special arrangement. He had to get a carriage, or he had to catch a train, or he had to, pack his hiking bag. It was literally barely a 10-minute walk. And, it was his main friend in town, so where else is he going to go, right? So if Van Gogh had free time, where else was he going to go? And it was just around the corner from him. I actually measured the walk from the Revue inside Auvers to Dr. Gashay. So the walk from there to Dr. Gashay, also the walk back. I also recorded it on camera. I recorded the walk. You're not going to believe it, but I can't find the footage. I don't know. I know it was because it was, I think it was actually 13 minutes. Because it took so long, it used up a heck of a lot of data. I'm not quite sure what I did with it. I've actually gone through all my camera chips. Some of them are 32 gigs, I think. And although I've got some footage of France and of Arles, for example, I've got all the photos took of Arles. I can't seem to find that video footage. I don't know whether I downloaded it to my computer and lost track of it, but I do know I recorded it. I just can't find it now. So that is actually quite sad, but maybe I need to go back there and do it again. I don't know. I did find it quite difficult recording stuff like that on my phone, because my phone didn't have much data on it, didn't have much memory. And so whenever I did that, remember I went to Portugal before, then I went to Arles. By the time I got to Auvers, I had very little memory as it was. And so sometimes you want to take another photo, you've got to delete another photo. It's not something I'm very proud of, but I really didn't expect to be getting so much material. Anyway, I did walk it on foot, measured the exact time and distance. I'm going to show you the map just so it's clear in your mind. We're going to look at green marker points for Chaponval station, pink for the station at Auvers, and a black pen to show where Van Gogh was staying, and that's at the Revue Inn. It's very close to the station. And then a blue pen to Dr. Gachets' home. So this is obviously from the map I showed you earlier. Just a picture of it. So the green is Chaponval, and then it's a walk following the contour kind of the river. There's the main road. There's Dr. Gachets' home. You can see it's definitely the closest station. Then it's almost the same distance from the station to Dr. Gashay is from Dr. Gashay to Van Gogh, where Van Gogh was staying. And then look how very, very close the station is to where Van Gogh was staying. Very, very, very close. I think that's the railway track. going there? Or is it this green line? Not sure. But anyway, that's the one railway station, that's the other. And you can see both Dr. Gashay and Vincent van Gogh's home are within both of these railway stations. But the Orvers railway station is much closer to Van Gogh's home, right? Is that clear? Can you guys see? Okay. One person that's missing from this chat is someone who complained about me not putting the pictures up on screen. I wonder where she is. She did a kind of apologize, not that an apology was really necessary, but anyway, so at the bottom of page 63, Bailey provides our first glimpse of the family dynamic. This is also pretty important. Can I just... Is that more horizontal? And so what immediately stands out, tell me if I'm wrong, what immediately stands out from this family dynamic is Vincent van Gogh's energy. He's the most active person there. He's not the youngest person there. Theo's younger than him. Joe's younger than him. Marguerite, who's also there, is younger than him. Paul Gashay Jr. is 16 years old. He's also younger. But Vincent's running around like he's the life of the party. And so there's a quote from the bottom of page 63. According to Bailey, quote, Vincent insisted on carrying the baby himself and had no rest until he had shown the baby all the animals in Dr. Gachets' household. Vincent introduced his little namesake to the animal world. Does this seem like a sick, tired, depressed person? There's only someone who's really got a lot of energy and who's in a good mood that would want to take custody of a little child and entertain the child. Looking after very small children, infants, tends to be hard work, takes a lot out of you. And that wasn't all. He didn't just show baby Vincent the animals. He met his family at the station on time. And not just that, he didn't just was at the station, he was there carrying a bird's nest. According to Joe van Gogh, Vincent was standing at the station holding a bird's nest, and this was sort of his gift to his nephew, like, this is nature's art. And he kind of wanting to show this little child something interesting. And so if Van Gogh was disturbed and depressed, you'd imagine he'd be late, they'd have to go and fetch him at his digs kind of thing. They'd have to get him. And that he'd somehow failed to be considerate to his host in some way, but especially to an infant, because he's sort of tired, because he's preoccupied with things, he wouldn't really notice this little baby, and yet he wasn't. It's the opposite. Does that make sense to you? Who, like you guys have been mothers, how much energy and attention and being in the moment is involved with very small children, especially somebody else's very small child. Nisi says he sounds upbeat and happy. Stephanie says he was so thoughtful towards his baby nephew with the gift he presented. Yeah. Okay. Now we go to page 64. This is gonna be quite. It's going to raise a few eyebrows, I think. We've already spoken about Dr. Geshe. Seems like a bit of an oddball. He seems a bit of a weirdo. We've even said he may be a bit dodgy. Now look at the following. He had a heck of a lot of animals around his home, and I guess in his home. And on page 64 of Van Gogh's Finale, Bailey's book, he describes Dr. Gachets' menagerie. 8 cats, 3 dogs. One wonders, did the dogs chase the cats? What was going on? 2 peacocks, 1 tortoise, and a goat called Henriette. Just think about how these animals must have interacted with one another. Did the dogs chase the peacocks? Did the peacocks chase the cats? Did the goat chase the peacocks? Did the goats chase the cats? Did the goats, dogs and cats chase the peacocks? And my father actually kept kind of a, what do you call it? Was it a flock of peacocks on our farm? And they can make a huge noise, at the end of the day. It can be really, really loud. But for me, it's a very charming sort of sound. But what this revelation by the way, besides those animals, besides the goats, the goat, the peacocks, the dogs, the cats, he also kept hens, rabbits, ducks, and pigeons, right? That had to have been quite difficult to maintain. I mean, I know I actually went to a pool party not that long ago, and the people there kept rabbits, and I was told I can't bring my dog. It must be quite difficult keeping all the animals safe and happy when you've got ducks, pigeons, hens, and 8 cats and 2 peacocks. How do you maintain the peace, kind of thing? Stephanie says it's like a petting zoo. Karina says very lively, very lively. Pet pandemonium. Okay, so I think this revelation of all the animals at Dr. Gashay, and to me it kind of confirms what Stephanie's been saying in terms of those footnotes. I don't know, it's just hard for me to imagine that Dr. Gashay was this professional doctor, this guy who's very focused on what he's doing when he's got this chaotic farm scenario playing out at home. Also, the fact that he works a few days here and a few days there, it's kind of chaotic. If he was a really good doctor, you'd think he would just need to be in one place. Anyway, I think what this also shows, all of these animals, is the kind of more charming and familiar side to Dr. Gashay's home. So whether you like Dr. Gashay or not, it might be quite nice to be around all these critters. It might be like, I don't really like Dr. Gashay so much, but I wouldn't mind just coming around to feed the goats every now and then. I wouldn't mind, all that kind of thing. It is also a place where you could engage with pets and a small zoo of critters. Karina says, it is a handful to keep peace. Nisi says, I knew a woman who couldn't keep relationships with people. Her home sounded just like that. That is a really good point. Sometimes people keep a lot of animals because they don't have many or any relationships with people. Definitely good point. Nisi says his zoo may have been his people magnet. So the fact that Vincent felt comfortable showing baby Vincent all the animals, it wasn't just that Vincent picked up the little baby and they sort of went to Dr. Gashay's house and had lunch. Vincent kind of introduced this little baby to all the animals. That shows you that Vincent van Gogh himself was very familiar. He'd kind of inveigled himself within the Gashay household. Because he was visiting there so often, he'd gotten to know the layers of the household beyond the primary people there. He didn't just know Dr. Gashay, he knew Dr. Gashay's children. He didn't just know Dr. Gashay and his children, he knew about the animals. He knew he was in the garden and so on and so on. And so you can take that further and further and further, and then also say, did he know about Dr. Gashay's military background? Did Dr. Gashay ever show him his guns or photos from the war, or did he tell him war stories? You know, you can take it further and further and further. But what we do see is that he'd already gotten to know the household beyond the Gashays themselves. That's quite an important point to stress, is that Vincent van Gogh doesn't just go to Dr. Gashay's house, paint a portrait and go home. He's getting to know the Gashays beyond the superficial. He's getting to know them quite deeply. And that's pretty fast work for within the first 2 weeks. You could imagine if he comes around here and there, it might take quite a while to get to know these animals. But he's gotten to know them pretty quick. And the pace of this familiarity suggests that when Dr. Gashay wasn't home, Vincent often was. Interestingly, we also get a glimpse of Marguerite in this setting. And this is again according to Bailey. Bailey writes, quote, "The weather was lovely, so Marguerite helped the housekeeper arrange lunch for them under the trees." Marguerite is helping the housekeeper. So one can safely assume if Marguerite was helping to prepare meals for Vincent's family members, she had to have done so from time to time for the artist himself. When Vincent was there, just him, painting or doing whatever, you can imagine them saying, "Oh, do you want to stay for lunch? Are you hungry?" And who knows, and bear in mind, it's a household that's wealthy enough, has the resources to provide meals, right? It's a well-to-do family. They've even got a housekeeper. And who knows, perhaps they also ate a few meals together. It's also possible that if Marguerite said, "Vincent, are you hungry?" then she would make a meal for him and herself and perhaps her brother. And then Dr. Geshe wasn't there. So they might actually have had certain meals together. Besides that, this format of the lunch out in the garden, it suggests folk who might enjoy picnicking, and one wonders whether Marguerite ever packed snacks or meals for Van Gogh to enjoy out in the field. Did Van Gogh ever sort of go to the River Oise, see couples go out into the boats and say to Marguerite, "Hey, should we go out on the river, right? Should we pack a picnic and go and eat out on the river," kind of thing. Did she ever join him on any of his ganders? If he was sort of walking somewhere, maybe she was coming back from the shops or getting eggs from a farm or whatever. "Oh, where are you off to?" "Oh, no, I'm walking to wherever, and the wheat fields." "Oh, I'm on my way there. I'll walk a little bit with you." Did they ever picnic together? So they're kind of picnicking in the garden in terms of all of these people together. And that also sets the tone for we are two families that are now becoming almost one family, or we are two families that are now friends and we're familiar with one another, so we can kind of be seen with one another, and we can be familiar with one another, kind of thing, right? So everyone is in the garden. I can't actually read what I'm saying here. Everyone stays in the garden at the same time. There's a long red table where Dr. Gashay posed for his portrait. They're all sitting at that table again. Bailey suggests that after lunch, Dr. Gashay showed his guests his own personal portrait of himself and adds, "Its paint still wet." Now, I must say, when I saw that, my eyes rolled. I don't know what you thought about that, Stephanie, but it's like, you might say, well, you're speculating about picnics and so on, but that's based on what they're already doing, and we know that he was invited again. And the fact that Marguerite is actually getting involved in preparing food. I think that's a bit more of a stretch to sort of say, probably Dr. Gashay showed his guests his own personal portrait of himself. The reason I say this is, why is it not mentioned anywhere? Like, why? Vincent never said in any letter to his brother, I'm almost finished with the second portrait of Dr. Gashay, or Theo saying, it's an incredible honor. Dr. Gashay came to see me at the gallery and he said he actually asked you to paint another portrait. Can you imagine if he did say that? Can you imagine if Dr. Gashay was at this gallery and he said, your brother painted such an awesome portrait of me, I've asked him to do another one and I want to keep it. Heads would have turned at the gallery. They would have been like, this guy is good. Vincent van Gogh, he's a portrait painter of note. We need to start selling his art. We need to get more portraits, whatever. But it's not mentioned. And personally, I suspect that the second portrait was only painted years later, quite likely off a not great quality photograph. It's also important to bear in mind, at the turn of the 19th century, photography was still in its infancy. You can see some photos, I'm sure you've seen this, Stephanie. You can see some photos of Dr. Gashay in Martin Bailey's book. The photography is okay. It's kind of black and white, but it seems almost overexposed. It's not very clear. The first photo sort of came out in 1850, I think. But painting was still giving photography a run for its money. Bear in mind, you didn't really have color photography, and photos were kind of dull. So painting could still give portrait photography a run for its money. And bear in mind what Vincent van Gogh was doing. It's almost as though he understood that photography was a threat to art. And I mean, I'm a photographer, my brother's an artist. I prefer photography, and I'm kind of an artistic person. My brother paints a lot of his paintings off photos. I quite like the idea of you take a beautiful photo of a landscape and then that is the artwork. Or you take a beautiful photo of flowers or whatever it is, and then you've snapped a moment that is perfect, and then that is the artwork. And think about that, where you have the limits to a portrait, and then this artist who just fills the portrait with energy and character and all that kind of thing in a way that a photo can't. He sort of embellishes the background, he makes it come alive with electricity, and it sort of seems to be moving even, right? There was somebody who asked a question in the previous live stream who I think was very offended, just really didn't like how I dealt with it, but it was a reference to Starry Night. And I don't know if you know this, those worlds were actually based on some of the earliest photos that were taken from telescopes that showed that stars, some of the stars in the sky are actually whirling galaxies or spiral galaxies. And so they sort of realized that some of those pinpricks that you see in the sky aren't stars, they're actually galaxies. And what these galaxies look like when you zoom in aren't like little stars, but sort of whirls and spirals and so on. And if you look at Vincent's Starry Night, he's drawing whirls as stars. But he got that from photos taken by telescopes of galaxies. And so there is a translation of something from a photo going into art. And for some reason, it just seems incredibly compelling. Part of the reason for that is it's authentic. It's based on what stars actually do look like, or galaxies. Just read what Stephanie says here. Need to examine more handwriting samples, but it is not, in my opinion, Vincent's handwriting. etching version date looks more similar to Dr. Gashay's handwriting than Vincent. That's interesting. Yeah, I also don't think that is a authentic etching. I really don't. Good observation from Stephanie. She says the lunch placard. This is for a different thing. We're going to get to that in a moment. There was another meeting that they had where that Vincent attended, only Vincent, and it was to celebrate the birthday of Marguerite and Paul. And then Dr. Geshe especially made like a lunch placard to sort of, almost like a birthday card to celebrate that sort of thing. So, yeah, I'm kind of just criticizing Bailey for saying after lunch, Dr. Gashay probably showed his guests his own personal portrait of himself. Its paint still wet. The paint still wet is kind of acknowledging that if he did paint it, he would have had to have painted it very, very recently because he didn't have much time. And we do know that Vincent van Gogh painted another major portrait, one of his most famous portraits, in that interval between the portrait of Dr. Geshe and the visit of Theo to Orvez. Now, you might say, you know what, you're an absolute idiot. Why would Vincent van Gogh write about every painting he painted? Why would he say, I painted another picture of Dr. Gashay? Why would he do it? Well, guess what? This picture he painted of the Church of Orvez, he also describes. So the painting we know that he painted in this interval, he describes in detail. So why wouldn't he talk about the other portrait of Dr. Geshe and maybe say why he took out the novels and why he made the changes that he did? Why is it just not mentioned? Why does his brother not mention? Dr. Geshe is a very important person to the Van Goghs. So if he said, I want a second portrait, that would have been momentous. It's just not mentioned. And some art experts may think that's completely normal. It absolutely isn't normal. Absolutely isn't normal that you just wouldn't mention something of such incredible importance. Of course you would. We've got the mentioning of someone carrying a bird's nest, details like that. We've got the mentioning of an inventory of the animals at Dr. Gashay's garden. Are you telling me that, it just slipped our mind, we forgot to document that when he painted the second portrait of Dr. Geshe, we just forgot to mention it. It's really laughable, really is laughable. As I say, I suspect the second portrait was painted years later from a photo. It's possible that the painter of the second portrait left the novels out because he couldn't actually read it from the photo, or it was even a sense of, well, my handwriting on the spine isn't going to correspond, so let me rather leave that out. Could be that as well. Okay, so we do know that he painted the church in Orvez on June 5th, which is between the first portrait of Dr. Geshe and Theo's visit to Orvez, and this is it. That is the church at Orvez. That's a photo of it. Now, I want you to pay attention to these lines here. Can you see that they go down and then they actually go tilt slightly up there? This one you can't see so clearly, but can you see there, it's not going straight down, it tilts up at the side. There's also a slight thing there. Do you see that? There as well, it goes down and then goes up slightly over there. And if you look carefully, well, I guess not that carefully, you have a road diverging in front of the church, right? And then this is the actual portrait. There you can see that slight tilt on the side there. He's also got a bit of a tilt there. Look at that curve there and look at this. Well, it's going straight. Well, not straight, but doing that and then going down. That's this side here. Now, bear in mind, this ceiling has probably been refurbished. And I don't say probably lightly because when I was there, they were actually doing refurbishing. This is a picture I took when I was there. There you can see that in maybe better detail. But there you can actually see it actually is being refurbished as we speak, which means these lines would have been corrected. You know, if there's any subsidence and so on, it would have been corrected. So while I'm here, I just want to show you, look at the blue in this portrait of Adeline Revue, the innkeeper's daughter. Look at this is like a blue background. Look at the texture behind it. And look at this fake portrait of Dr. Gashay. There's no texture here. None of these energy lines that you get in a dress or in the background, you don't really get them anywhere here. A little bit in the coat, but not much. Right? And then look at all these energy lines here. Look at that. And then look at this in terms of the energy lines, the texture. Look at this blue and the texture in it and the fake Dr. Gashay. You don't really have any of that. He's got some kind of weird, what do you call it? Almost like a pluses and minus thing going on here, almost like a crossword puzzle. It's almost like a tapestry, just lines going down and lines going vertically and horizontally. But that's not what you see here. This is all horizontal, and there it sort of changes almost like water. That's not what you see there. That's not what you see here. This is kind of churning, whereas this is kind of almost like something you might see in a wicker basket or a reed chair or something. Okay. Can you guys see that okay? Gothic style, that sky in the church painting is amazing. Yeah, it doesn't look like the same technique. And look at the blue behind me as well. Look at all the effort that he goes into to do something with the sky, and then suddenly with the portrait of Dr. Geshe, oh, let's just do nothing, you know. So there's some speculation that the church at Auvers might be fake as well. I think it's based on the type of canvas, being slightly different to the canvas Van Gogh typically used. I can't quite remember what it was, if it was the size of the canvas or the type of the canvas. But I give Church at Auvers a thumbs up. I believe it is authentic. I'm not sure I like the almost uniform blue of the sky above it. When I say I don't like it, I mean I don't like that it's fairly uniform compared to his other skies that are very energetic, like the one behind me. But it's nevertheless a lot less uniform than the fake portrait of Dr. Gashay. And so in his letter to his sister Wilhelmina, Van Gogh makes the following comment about the sky. This is Van Gogh writing to his sister, not even to Theo, writing in detail about the sky, just the sky above the church. And this is why I say, why would he not mention the portrait of Dr. Gashay? You know, I've made this more orange, I've done that, I've decided to make this change, that change, whatever. He goes into so much detail, and this is what he says. I have a larger picture of the village church, an effect in which the building appears to be violet-hued against a sky of simple deep blue color, pure cobalt. The stained glass windows appears ultramarine blotches. The roof is violet and partly orange. In the foreground, some green plants in bloom and sand with a pink flow of sunshine in it. And once again, it is nearly the same thing as the studies I did in Newnan of the old tower and the cemetery, only it is probably that now the color is more expressive, more sumptuous. I actually meant to, maybe I'll do it for the next episode. When I was in Newnan, the Dutch fellow I spoke to had some shingles, not like the sickness. He had some shingle stones that came from a roof of a building that had been demolished, and he'd recovered some of the roof tiles, I guess. And this was from a building that Van Gogh had actually painted. And then he actually gave them to me. And I actually have them with me. I meant to have it here for this episode. But what's quite a amazing feeling is holding these fragments of roof tiles and thinking they were formerly part of a roof that Van Gogh looked at and painted, and just kind of gives you a sense of, holding it, feeling it, and kind of, sometimes you can sort of tap the pieces of wood against each other just as a gritty sense of reality. It just gives you a sense of the passage of time. Whatever it is, 130 years ago, 140 years ago, Vincent van Gogh was walking somewhere and the air was at that time, and the rain and the weather was touching those tiles, making them glisten, making them a certain hue. And here you are, on the other side of time with these in your hand, and here they are now in South Africa in somebody's lounge. These parts of a roof that Vincent van Gogh saw, or that was part of the roof that he saw in the Netherlands like 130 years ago, just like how things can change, how perceptions and perspective can change, right? So when we do the next live, I'll try and remember to bring those pieces of tile with me and just show you guys. Stephanie says, I love the path and greenery with flowers and the vivid painting of the church. It is a very compelling portrait. I think what's important to bear in mind is it is a Catholic church. It has a strong bearing on our story, meaning like on this particular day, I think it was the 5th of June, somewhere around there, Vincent van Gogh is painting a church. That church, the people who belong to it will later say, when Vincent van Gogh is dead, you will not bring his body into this church. You will not hold a funeral for him in this church, right? So it's kind of got a bit of a tragic legacy. You might look at that painting and think it's a pretty painting, but Vincent van Gogh's a Protestant guy. He was from a Protestant family. That is a Catholic church. And when Vincent van Gogh was believed to have committed suicide, that church said, you're not going to bring him into this church. You're not going to bury him in our cemetery. We are not going to have a funeral for that guy here. Right? Not very nice, is it? So I think the portrait of Adeline Revue is a great way of both authenticating the Church of Orvez and also further undermining the artwork, if that's the word, in the second portrait of Dr. Geshe. It's a further reason to say this doesn't look right, just in terms of the sky. I've actually been dying to put up a episode dealing with why the second version is fake, but every time I want to do it, there's some more news about Alec Baldwin. I just haven't been able to get around to it. I have heard some people suggesting deep symbolism, not only in Van Gogh's depiction of the church without doors. So from that angle, you just see windows. And this now suggests suffocation or claustrophobia or something like that. And then also similarities of the diverging road, similar to the diverging roads in wheat fields with crows, as if he's sort of trying to convey some deep disquiet, right? I'm not sure I see either of those things. I'm not sure I see any sign of claustrophobia. I'm not saying that he didn't have any feelings of conflict in terms of the church and how he felt about it, just that I don't think he was really trying very hard to communicate that. I think he was is painting a church. And when I was there, I was surprised and impressed by just how close to reality Van Gogh's version was to the real thing. As I mentioned earlier, the lines of the roof in front seem cartoony and unrealistic. So when you've not been to Orvez, when you haven't actually stood in front of that church, the church seems like very unrealistic. It's like, no, I think there's a lot of license here. And then when I was actually standing there, I was like, wow, this, I recognize it. It's very recognizable. I also thought that the architecture was very exaggerated, but it's not. As for purposefully painting the church without doors, the issue is the view from the other end is limited because of a staircase. So if you decided, like, I want to show the door, to get far enough to capture the height of the church, you kind of have to back up. And if you back up, the only way to back up, you've got to go down some stairs. And that then limits your view of the church because you can only see through this sort of narrow stairway. The church was being refurbished when I got there, which I think shows that some of the lines of the church, I'm talking about especially the horizontal lines leading to the tower, they may have been less straight than they are today. Just in the same way that very old buildings and very old walls change shape over time. I can tell you right opposite where I'm sitting now. So if you just went forward a little bit, looked out the window and down, there have been people working for the past month demolishing a wall that has been, I wouldn't say about to fall over, but just moved quite out of its angle. And you might not think buildings move or shift or go out of alignment, but they do over time and with a lot of things like weather and rain and all that kind of thing. So, by the way, just so that you guys know, this church is almost directly behind the Revue Inn. I don't mean it's like here's the church and here's the Revue Inn, like it's direct. I mean, it's there might be a few houses between them, but they're like really close to each other. Victoria, good to see you here. Why are you a lost soul? I actually saw a picture or a video you put up on Instagram of the rain in England. That I thought that was so artistic, really beautiful. The way the rain was on these old buildings. So yeah, just to reiterate, the Revue Inn and the Church of Orvez are very close to one another. The Church of Orvez is going kind of away from the river, up the hillside, so it's higher up. It's a little bit further away from the station. It's also, you can see the top of the church peeking over the ridge and forest line from the location where Wheatfield with Crows was painted. Also, if you want to visit the small cemetery where Vincent van Gogh is buried, you pass by the church before the road twists around and rises over the hillside. And so this is a sign I took, the tombs of Theo and Vincent. That's quite close to the church as well. Okay. So we're approaching the 2-hour mark and also midnight here. I need to wrap this up. We're almost done. Midway through page 64, Bailey asserts that the background in Church at Auvers is not dissimilar to the backgrounds in. Let me just repeat that. Midway through page 64, Bailey says that the background in the church in Church at Auvers is not dissimilar to the backgrounds in the portrait. So what he's kind of doing is he's saying the background of the church is the same as portrait number 1 of Dr. Gashay and portrait number 2 of Dr. Gashay. I disagree. I think it's similar. It's more similar to the first portrait of Dr. Geshe. It's not similar to the second. It's more dissimilar. The texture in the second portrait of Dr. Geshe is very different to the church and the first one. Do you guys agree with that? Do you agree that the texture of the portrait of Dr. Geshe and Church of Auvers, it's just totally different to the second portrait of Dr. Gashay. At the bottom of page 66, Bailey provides his review of the family visit. He describes it as a success and that it was, quote unquote, fondly remembered. But I thought Van Gogh was supposed to be sick, unhappy, and suicidal. So yeah, the family come to visit him and they have a great day. I suppose, I mean, isn't he supposed to be unwell? Trouble? Doesn't he argue with his family? Isn't there some kind of drama? 22 years later, Paul Gashay Jr. seemed to have vivid memories of the visit as well. Oh, so he was present as well. In a letter recalling the visit to Joe in 1912, Gashay Jr. wrote, and this is quoted by Martin Bailey, "I well remember that Sunday when you had come with your husband after lunch in the courtyard. Vincent had taken your son in his arms and he ran after the ducks. The uncle and the nephew, laughing one after the other." Laughing. Vincent's running after the ducks. But I thought Van Gogh was supposed to be troubled and suffering from mental illness and suicidal. Bailey also refers to Joe recalling the visit and how peacefully quiet and happy it was. Look how many people you've got here all saying the same thing. Dr. Gachets just said that he's optimistic and that he's cured. You've got his son saying that they all had fond memories of it. You've got Joe saying that it was really happy. So what's the problem? I thought Van Gogh is supposed to be miserable and suicidal. Now we go to page 67. This is the last page of chapter 6. And this is also dealing with the family visit. It starts off reiterating that the visit was a good one, this time by citing Vincent's own letter to his brother. So you might say, you know what, these are people talking on Vincent's behalf. It's Joe saying, oh no, it was a nice, happy visit. But actually Vincent was actually under the surface. He was anxious, he was not happy. He was putting on a brave face. You might say Theo or whoever, everyone was just saying it was a nice day, but actually Vincent was like, you know what, please just leave. I need to get back to my painting. And yet in his own letters, in his own words, he said, Vincent van Gogh said, the afternoon left him with very pleasant memories. Not pleasant memories, very pleasant memories. but I thought Van Gogh's supposed to be struggling, sick, and suicidal. And I want to keep doing that. As we talk again and again about happy days and enjoyable moments, as we go through the summer epic, I'm going to keep saying whenever that happens, I thought he's supposed to be suicidal. And equally, if we find a moment where he's unhappy, we can say, wow, could this be the sort of black seed, that this dark shadow that starts moving over him? And then what we need to do is look at how many happy, joyful moments are there, and how many black crows are there, and how does it look? Is it a lot of black crows and just a few happy moments, or what? What are we talking about here? The irony of this whole thing is we're thinking about Van Gogh's health. We're thinking about his mental health and his well-being. Meanwhile, his own family aren't actually doing so well. Vincent had actually asked the doctor to give his advice on his brother and his sister-in-law and the baby. All three of them weren't doing so well. And now, once again, you've got to say, if Vincent van Gogh wasn't healthy, wasn't very in tune with reality, why would he have this acute concern and this ability to articulate, can you please offer your advice? I care about these people. Can you do something about it? People who are depressed often don't even know what's happening with somebody else because they are so caught up in their own world. They're like drowning in their own drama. You know what I mean? Their thoughts are like this soup it's like a quagmire, and they have no awareness of anyone else. And so we see with Vincent van Gogh, that's not happening. He's very aware of everyone else, including of a little baby. He's very preoccupied with entertaining a little baby. So you have this ironic situation where the whole world thinks Vincent van Gogh is sick and miserable and troubled and mad. Meanwhile, his own family are sicker and more miserable than he is. I'm talking about his brother is sicker and more miserable than he is. His brother will soon want to leave his job, express his unhappiness with his work. His wife is struggling in terms of her health. She's not sleeping. I think baby Vincent's a bit of a handful. And for various reasons, Joe's not all that happy. Does that mean she's suicidal? Theo wants to quit his job. Does that mean he's suicidal? Just because you're a little bit unhappy doesn't mean you're going to commit suicide. Same thing with Vincent van Gogh. But the problem with the summer epic is it's documented how happy he was. But it's just this mainstream narrative. It's almost like reverse engineered. It's like, oh, he committed suicide, so he must have been unhappy. But then there are no signs that he was unhappy. And when we deal with a true crime analysis, we talk about the crime scene, when did it happen, motive, all those things, the proper true crime treatment, you'll see that none of this holds up either. One of the major problems is, why would you shoot yourself to put yourself out of your misery, only to shoot yourself through your abdomen and then suffer for another 30 hours? I mean, isn't the point of suicide to spare yourself further misery? Isn't the point of suicide, I'm going through unendurable agony, I want that agony to stop. So why on earth would you shoot yourself to endure excruciating agony for the next 30 hours? I mean, the idea of suicide is to put an end to your life, not to begin the process of much worse suffering. And that is the bottom line with Van Gogh's suicide. Just that the suicide itself doesn't make sense. But we need to deal with the whole fabric in order to make our case as though we're making a court case, right? So just in terms of just a bit more detail, Joe wasn't sleeping very well. I've mentioned in this sort of live stream how I've struggled with not sleeping, and it's a real thing. Vincent van Gogh's not struggling with lack of sleep. He doesn't have a problem with anxiety or anything. He's on a roll. He's happy. He's enjoying what he's doing. And Joe's so sort of not sleeping well, she's actually struggling to produce milk. And because the baby's not getting enough milk, the baby's also not doing great. The baby's a bit poorly. So yeah, you have a situation where Vincent is actually healthier and happier than everybody else. So much so, he's asking for the doctor's help for other people. He's not saying, doctor, please help me. He's saying, doctor, please help them. Doctor, please help her. Bailey admits the doctor was rather uninformative. Now, I think this is where I also wrote the A word a second time. Yeah, Vincent van Gogh's actually asking the doctor to help his family. And so once again, he's rather uninformative. Can't you please freaking do something about the situation? You're a doctor. Now, please do something about these people who aren't very well. 3 people, not just one. It's not like Theo's just struggling. Can you help him out? Theo's not in good shape. Joe's not in good shape. And this little baby's not in good shape either. Doctor, hi, doctor. Can you please help? What do you think he does? Do you think he helps? And so in the art expert's own words, I mean, he acknowledges this. He acknowledges that Dr. Gashay is, quote unquote, rather uninformative. And to go back to what Stephanie was saying in terms of those footnotes, he does seem to be a mediocre doctor. He has another instance of him being a mediocre doctor. Can you help out this person, that one, and that one? Response, he's rather uninformative. So what does he offer? He says something like, you know what, you guys need to just carry on eating what you're eating, but add 2 liters of beer a day. Have you ever heard of that kind of diagnosis for anything? Right? Like, I'm not sleeping enough. Actually, that might do me some good. Have 2 extra beers a day, okay? But that is his diagnosis. That was his diagnosis. 2 liters of additional beer a day. And then Theo actually followed these instructions quite religiously. In the middle of June, Theo spent 15 francs on beer. That's equal to half a month's rent. That's quite a lot of money. Stephanie says he did not share very sound or helpful advice. What kind of advice is it to continue with your diet on and drink 2 liters of beer a day? What? Absolutely. Bailey then takes us into the aftermath of the family visit. He says that Vincent continued to visit Dr. Gachets' home regularly for the rest of June. I'm sure he did. But there you have it in black and white. We are told that Vincent van Gogh is visiting Dr. Geshe regularly. This is during the rest of June. I'm sure it's true. I'm sure he was visiting regularly in early June, and now he's visiting regularly in the rest of June. And so why wouldn't he visit regularly in July? And so why wouldn't he, as part of the regular visits, he was also visiting on the day that he died? It makes sense, doesn't it? Where is it more likely that he was on a Sunday, visiting Dr. Gashay or painting a field somewhere? And you might say, well, I actually think it's more likely he was painting. Well, look how many Sundays he's already spent at Dr. Gashay. On June 22nd, Dr. Geshe invited Vincent to lunch again. Do you want to guess what day June 22nd was? June 22nd, 1890. This is the second of what I believe were at least 3 invitations to, come and join a family dinner, right? So the first is June 8th, The second is June 22nd, 2 weeks later. Not a long time, just 2 weeks later. Do you want to guess what day June 22nd was? Okay, so it was also a Sunday. The occasion was to celebrate the birthdays of, wait for it, Marguerite and Paul, who respectively had turned 21 and 17 the day before. So Vincent's actually a special guest. He's so intimately involved with the Gachets, now he's even celebrating the kids' birthdays. That's how involved he's become with the family. He's hanging with the doc, he's playing with the animals, and in a jiffy he seems to have become Uncle Vincent, not just his nephew, but to Gachay's offspring. And you can kind of imagine Dr. Geshe and Marguerite and Paul Jr. watching Vincent holding a little baby, thinking he's a good guy, thinking he's a family guy, thinking he's kind of an asset to a family. He's a good uncle, right? But do you think he is? Do you think Vincent is this dude that is holding a baby? Do you think he's as harmless as that seems to be? Stephanie says, I wonder if Marguerite turning 21 was symbolic for Vincent and Marguerite. That's interesting. Bear in mind, it is 21. It's like the age of majority. It's quite a big, I don't know whether it was like that in 1890s France, but, Something that could also have happened during this double birthday thing is, bear in mind, not just Marguerite's birthday, it's also Paul Jr. So one wonders, did Van Gogh give Marguerite something? Did Van Gogh give Paul something? And you can imagine if there are two birthdays, but the one gets a really nice gift or a very thoughtful gift, and the other one just gets a gift. That's kind of communicating something as well. How can I be a little bit more how can I be a bit more specific about what I'm saying? Imagine two people are having a birthday, and I like one of them. Like I'm really fond of this one person. I'm really biased towards this person, and so I really want to give them a nice gift, and so I give them this pen. Right? I think this pen comes from, is it from Mauritius? No, it's from Australia. Right? So I give this nice pen to the person that I really like. But someone else also has a birthday, so I give them this pen, which is just a very simple pen. And so the person receiving this pen is going to know in no uncertain terms, you really like me, or basically you like me more than you like that person. Right? And one wonders whether that took place with Marguerite Gashay and Paul Gashay Jr. And just bear the following in mind. Vincent van Gogh painted Marguerite Gachay's portrait. Then he painted her again in the garden, and we've been led to believe that he wanted to paint her a third time and may even have painted her a third time at the harmonium. How many times did he paint Paul Gashay Jr.? Stephanie says Paul Gashay Jr. may have felt resentful. He may also have been like a teenager, like, I don't have time for this crap. I'm going to go and play soccer or whatever. But before you kind of dismiss this and say, Van Gogh wouldn't really paint young people. Well, he painted Adeline Revue, who was, I think, 12 or 13 years old. So he painted that young person as well. So it wasn't as though he didn't want to paint youngsters. He also painted a youngish farm boy in Auvers. So I just want to emphasize the fact that he's painting Marguerite more than even her father, and not her brother at all. And doesn't that once again show that Vincent van Gogh does harbor these feelings of attraction to Marguerite, bearing again in mind he's been in a flippant asylum for a year. He hasn't really had the company of a woman in a genuine way for a really long time. And so he's enjoying all the animals and the garden and this wonderful setting. And part of the setting is this young woman who makes him lunch and makes him feel like he's a person again, makes him feel normal. And that's part of why he's feeling so happy. Maybe he's kind of in love. Corina says very possible in terms of the resentment. So the second meal was a repeat of the setting with Joe and Theo. They sat outside in the garden at the same red-orange table. This time it's just Vincent without his family members. It's also Dr. Gachey's daughter and son, and obviously Dr. Geshe himself. We don't know whether there were any other guests, but if there weren't any other guests, it once again shows, wow, didn't they have any other friends? What's going on? Did Vincent ask for an extra glass of wine during that sort of scenario? Yeah, they are. They're celebrating a birthday. Ha, 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 happy birthday, blah, blah, blah. Let's have another glass of wine kind of thing. Was Vincent sometimes left alone to chat with Marguerite? Maybe the doctor would get up to, let's say if a dog was hassling them, like wanting them to give out, food or something, or pawing someone, you might get up and take the dog to the back area or something like that. Or for whatever reason, you would have little moments where it was just Van Gogh and Marguerite sitting at the table. What would they say to one another? Did Vincent ask for an extra glass of wine? What did they make of Vincent's severed ear? What was the story about that? If anything, it had to have been interesting. If you're sitting at the table with someone who doesn't have an ear, you probably are going to have quite an interesting conversation about what happened, what's going on, right? Unless he said, I don't want to talk about it. I suppose that's possible, but he may have said, I don't really want to talk about it. At the conclusion of the chapter, near the bottom of page 67, Bailey says that the doctor and artist had now moved beyond a doctor-patient relationship and was very much that of friends. Again, could something similar have been brewing with the doctor's daughter, if only in Vincent's mind? So it may not necessarily be that Marguerite is like, wow, this artist is pretty cool. He's got quite strong leg muscles, or look at what beautiful hands he has, or he's got such interesting green eyes, or whatever. It's not necessarily that she felt a certain way. I think what's more important is if Vincent was thinking things and what was going on in his mind. And it's really hard to imagine that things weren't, especially given his history with other women and this drought that he'd been in for such a long time. Marguerite Geshe is really the only woman in Orvez that sort of kind of emerges as someone he might be interested in. There's not like somebody else that he would have encountered, if that makes sense. And he was visiting the Gachets' home regularly. So anyway, Bailey stresses there is no evidence that Dr. Gashay gave Van Gogh any treatment, meaning medical treatment. Okay, so now where's the substance for the suicidal narrative? I thought Van Gogh went to Orvez to begin with to sort of treat his depression or to treat his mental illness. Haven't you heard that before? That he left the asylum and he was being treated by a doctor in Orvez, and the whole thing was that he needed to recover from mental illness, but then he didn't, and he committed suicide. Have you heard that before? But meanwhile, Dr. Gashay doesn't give Van Gogh any treatment. Now, think about this. If it's true what Stephanie's been saying, and if those footnotes are true, that Dr. Geshe was a mediocre doctor, if it's true that his medical treatment of Vincent wasn't right, well, in other words, Van Gogh wasn't really being treated and he wasn't getting the right treatment. Well, it turns out he was pretty healthy anyway. In other words, if he was sick and he was getting the wrong treatment, he would have gotten more sick. But I think what this shows is that he wasn't sick. On pages 66 and 67, I've written the word suicide with a question mark next to it on 3 separate occasions. Each instance is a reference to Van Gogh apparently being pleased as punch with his situation in Orvez. He's enjoying where he is. He's having it's a much, much better situation than he was at the asylum. It's even a much better situation than in the Yellow House. You know, when he was with Paul Gogh, they disagreed, and it just wasn't a very happy situation. With Dr. Gashay, Dr. Gashay's kind of got contacts, but it's also a nice domestic setting. There's a housekeeper, there are nice meals cooked for them, there are animals, there's a garden. He can come and go as he pleases, and his family even come and visit him. It's a much better situation. So if there's no suicidal narrative, should we just skip the entire summer epic? Should we just skip to the end and say, okay, look, we're not going to find any signs of it, so let's just go to the end and assume we're not going to find any more reinforcement. And so then on July 27th, Van Gogh just had a bad day. So as true crime investigators, can we kind of say, look, let's stop wasting our time trying to investigate this. You're not going to find anything. There isn't anything. Let's just go to the end. And then, so you just had a bad day, just like that. You just had a bad day. That brings me back to my tire exploding today. Was that just a bad day? Did my tire just explode? It's just random. These things happen. What do you guys think? Yeah, you could have had a situation where the youngest son who was at home saw what he thought was inappropriate stuff going on. He's like, Dad, I think Marguerite likes this guy. Or I actually saw Vincent looking through Marguerite's window when she was getting changed or whatever. Alarm bells, cling, 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 right? So Stephanie asked, did you hit a rock or riding too fast? So like I said, what happened to me today, I've never experienced before. So as far as I know, I didn't hit anything. Before the tire exploded, I mean, during the entire ride, I didn't hit anything. I didn't, what was the other one? Was I riding too fast? At the time that it exploded, I was actually on quite a steep uphill. So my weight was actually mostly on the back wheel. So it was the front wheel that blasted. And, you know, the tar was smooth and clear. There were no stones, rocks. There was no debris on the road. Robbie says, did someone do something to it? No. Bria, you're on the right track. Bria says, of course things happen, but there seems to always be a reason. Stephanie asked, with these new tires, maybe there's a recall. I'm just grateful you're okay. You guys are now coming on into the right track. So those are actually pretty old tires, not worn, so they weren't like threadbare or anything, but definitely quite old. Through the last 2 or 3 years, I don't know whether I've ridden that bike I don't think I've actually ridden it maybe in the past year. I've ridden other bicycles like mountain bikes, and I've recently bought another time trial bike, and I've ridden that one recently, and I've ridden the tires that I rode today, the wheels, the rims. I've ridden on another bike, so I've ridden quite a lot on those tires with nothing happening. Karina says, you brought on a mishap by your own exuberance and strength. That's interesting. Karina, that's quite a good question. Did you inflate your tire too much? Now, this is quite interesting. This morning, before I went out, I felt that the back tire was a bit too flat, and the back tire takes far more weight and stress than the front one. So I pumped it up, and I had a bit of difficulty with it. The valve seemed to kind of be stuck. So I had to use my shirt to loosen it, and then I pumped it up, and it didn't pump up very efficiently. It didn't go into it very well, but I did pump it up. I did manage to pump it up, and so there seemed to be some problems with the back wheel. Like I said, it was slightly deflated. I pumped it harder. I had some problems with the valve, but there was nothing wrong. I managed to ride without any problems with the back wheel. The front wheel was hard, and then after riding on it for over an hour, that is when it exploded. So it wasn't like you would expect that if there was a weakness in it, you'd expect it would have done something within the first 5 minutes, the first downhill, the first whatever, right? So Nisi says, you're far too kind for karma. Thanks for that. Stephanie says, I guess this is your cue to invest in new tires. Decision has been made for you. Robbie says, did it perish with age? By the way, the back tire is far more worn as well, right? So I'm gonna address this, and I want you to think about it in terms of Vincent van Gogh. I want you to think about this thing of, let's just forget about the whole summer epic. Let's ignore all the paintings he was painting. And so it was just a random thing. He had a bad day on the 27th of July and he just shot himself, right? Think about that, and then think about what I'm going to tell you now. When the tire exploded, like I said, it's the first time ever that I've ever ridden a bicycle and a tire's done that. First of all, the sound was like louder than a gunshot. And your first sense is that it's totally random, it's a total fluke, it's totally unpredictable. But the fact is, both those wheels, both the one and the other one, are the valves of those, because it's a specialized kind of deep section rim, the valves are a little bit dodgy. They are not, because of the type of rim, every time you pump it up, there's a bit of wear and tear. The valves are an extra length. And the last time I was actually in the bicycle shop, I actually said to the owner, should I actually replace these tires? And what I'm saying now is absolutely fact. The last time I was in the bicycle shop, I said to the owner, they were doing something else. I think they were fixing the handlebars. This was of a different frame, but with those rims on. I said, do you think I should replace the tires? And he said, wait for something to happen. And so I didn't touch wood, and so something did happen. So what we're talking about here is equipment and material that was way past its sell-by date, right? On paper, you would have expected the back wheel to have shown weakness, but the fact is, it was really a matter of time before these tires were going to cause problems, right? What I'm trying to say is what actually happened today was inevitable. And although it seems like it is random, it's absolutely part of lots of patterns that are taking place. It's a scenario, it's quite similar to you put a car tire in your car. Maybe you don't drive your car that much because these are specialized rims. You don't use them necessarily in ordinary training. And as a result, they're not used that much, but they nevertheless age, right? And certain parts of them can become quite sensitive with age. If there's metal on them, they can rust or whatever it is. I'm talking about the valves. So what I'm trying to say is, although it feels like it's extremely random and unique, it was totally inevitable. And that is something that we miss so often in true crime. Something happens, like the Rush shooting with Elena Hutchins. But almost every crime that happens, in fact, I would go as far as to say is, without exception, every single crime that happens isn't some kind of random fluke that somebody just snapped and things just happened out of nowhere. When you go and study and understand the circumstances, the dynamics, the financial situation going on, the personalities involved, the broader context, what you see is that things were evolving in a certain direction. What happened ultimately was absolutely inevitable, absolutely predictable. And in that sense, there are actually no accidents. Earlier today, I was watching a documentary on Netflix called Downfall, which is about the airplane accidents with the, is it the 737 MAX? And the idea was that when the first plane crashed, it was like, oh, that was just a random accident, just absolutely. But then it turns out it's not random at all. When you know the background to that, it was absolutely inevitable. Just absolutely inevitable that was going to happen. And then it did happen again, I think 5 months later. And then when they went and studied what was going on, and they studied the corporate culture, and they studied all the staff that had been laid off and their approach to safety, it was absolutely inevitable that you're going to have these disasters taking place, where they were absolutely insisting that they're not going to give any training for airline safety. So the bursting of my tire, which feels random and freaky, is an analogy to the 737 MAX. I'm going to watch it on Netflix. And the criminal stuff that's going on around that, all the stuff that's been covered up and the stuff that they knew was going on, none of it was an accident. It was all absolutely inevitable. And then take that and also look at what happened with Vincent van Gogh. And are we saying, so he committed suicide, it was completely random? If he committed suicide, we need to see signs of wear and tear. We're not seeing those signs. If he committed suicide, we've got to see mental distress, anxiety, depression. We're not seeing those signs. If it's murder, we need to start seeing signs of human dynamics that tend to play in other murders that we know of, such as somebody having an affair, such as money, such as jealousy, such as trying to control situations. And what we found already are there are certain likely driving forces, such as you have a bad doctor and someone who maybe has syphilis, and the doctor's lost his wife, and there's someone who's got syphilis, right? And does the information come through later on where Theo says to Dr. Gashay, is my brother doing okay? Because, by the way, he's actually got syphilis. Or Dr. Gashay finds out that Theo's got syphilis. Oh, well, then doesn't your brother have as well? Oh, shit. Right? Paddy says the Rust tragedy is a perfect analogy. Karina says the pilots didn't even know they had the system in their planes. Absolutely. So what I want you to think about is the next time something happens to you that feels like a total random thing, remember that it's not, that nothing is random. Everything is evolving according to a pattern. Everything is evolving and devolving and changing according to something that is going its inevitable course. Things that break down don't just break down. Not that long ago, I had a geyser in my roof that gave up the ghost. It's exactly the same thing with my wheel. It's not like a freak accident. It's a very old geyser. I think it's something like 30 years old. It should not have lasted as long as it did last, right? So when you think something freaky happened, it's actually something that is inevitable, but you just lost track of it. And it's so important to bear this in mind with true crime, because over and over and over and over and over again in defense cases, they try and make it seem like it's completely random. It's completely disconnected to reality. It's completely fragmented from, it's breaking all those little strings that tie it to all the interrelationships that's going on. Oh, this thing just happened. And that is why the job of true crime is to go and figure out all those contextual circumstances that the mainstream narrative have severed, clumsily severed, and then just sticky taped some other scenario onto. We've got to go and do that hard work of finding those relationships and those situations and those circumstances and those contexts and threading them together and creating a mosaic. And that is then the genuine situation that played out, right? Robbie says she thinks the doctor was a time bomb waiting to go off and not Vincent. That's what we want to still see. We want to see, as time goes by, what is going on. We are going to come across Vincent being unhappy about something. We are going to come across that. And the question is, how much weight are we going to give it? We are also going to have Vincent being unhappy with his family. And how much weight do we give that? Okay, so to wrap up, this is a much longer episode than I thought it would be. So I've said on July 27th, did Van Gogh just have a bad day? Was it just a bad day? Can you say that my tire exploded this morning? I just had a bad day. I was just unlucky. Well, I've got another wheel. And I think Stephanie was really astute in saying you really need to replace both of those at this point. Obviously, the one I have to replace, but it makes sense to replace the other one as well. And I would much rather the tire gave in where it did and when it did in a relatively not important event than like training for a massive triathlon. Because I don't know if I've ever touched wood. I don't know if I've ever had a puncture in a triathlon, ever. And I've done lots of triathlons. I'm quite a good visual rider. If I see small stones, small pieces of glass, cracks in the road, whatever, I'm just very careful to avoid them. So I've just been quite fortunate. I've virtually never, I very, very, very seldom get punctures. And so today did seem freaky, but it wasn't because I hit anything. It's because the tire simply breathed its last. Nothing lasts forever. People don't live forever. Machines don't last forever. Materials don't last forever. But the fact that something stops lasting is totally predictable. You can say, you know what, it's so many years old. It's right. In terms of Van Gogh, so if you say Van Gogh committed suicide because he just had a bad day. Do you think Brian Laundrie just had a bad day? Do you think in September last year, Brian Laundrie just had a bad day and so he died? Like if you were Brian Laundrie's niece and you were a little girl and then you found out, oh, Brian Laundrie took his life, well, he just had a bad day. Or would you say, you know what, he had a girlfriend and they were kind of in a van and then they were in Moab and this happened? Or did he just have a bad day? Stephanie, you might think that it's an important investment, but you won't believe it. I've spent quite a lot of money already on a fork for a Cervelo bike that also seemed a bit defective. So I've actually been trying to prevent mechanical mishaps. I just haven't managed to prevent all of them. But I ordered a special Cervelo fork from Italy, pretty damn expensive. Bria knows about it. But the thing is, because I've been restarting my fitness journey, I have been trying to upgrade my equipment, my clothing, and so on. I just didn't get to everything, but I'm slowly getting there. Bria says all the events of his life lead up to it. And I do think if you're trying to understand Van Gogh's suicide, right, then I think you need to compare it to a intertextual suicide like Brian Laundrie that we know about in true crime. And with Brian Laundrie, you can see what was playing into that. You can see that the death of his fiancée, whether it was murder or not, and we know it was murder, but whether it was murder or not, that would be very depressing. That would be very traumatic. It wouldn't be a small little thing affecting your sanity. It would be totally dominating your peace of mind or your lack of peace of mind, right? And so what on that scale do we have with Vincent van Gogh? A Brian Laundrie scale misery. Where is it? Where is the Brian Laundrie scale misery in Van Gogh's summer epic? Does that make sense? Are you guys following me? Okay, so to wrap up, Bailey concludes by saying Dr. Gashay treated patients in Auvergne for half the week, but then spent the rest of the week attending his practice in Paris. Again, that to me shows that the doctor's not a very good doctor. You'd think that, in other words, he doesn't have enough patients either in Paris or in Auvergne. Does that make sense? He doesn't have enough patients in Auvergne. That's kind of understandable. It's a small place, but then again, he's virtually the only doctor there. But then he also doesn't have enough patients in Paris. What's going on with that? Isn't it because he's not a very good doctor? And what kind of doctor prescribes beer for a family where the mother can't produce milk, the father's stressed, and I think he had a cold or something, and the little baby is also, who prescribes beer for that? Beer for everyone. I think also says the kind of person Dr. Gashay is. I mean, did he think beer is very good for himself? I don't know. So, while he was there, the doctor, in Bailey's words, was out of touch, meaning when the doctor was in Paris, he would be out of touch to the people in Auvergne, meaning Marguerite, Paul Jr., the housekeeper, probably Vincent as well. So when he left, it was like, when the cat's away, the mice will play. When he went to Paris for 3-4 days, it sounds like he would even sleep there. I don't know whether he would come back home. I don't know. But he would be in Paris. And when he was there, what do you think these teenagers would do? It's not just one, it's two. What do you think a pair of teenagers do when dad's out of town, but it's effectively both parents aren't home? And it's happening every week for half the week, all the time, right? It's a pair of teenagers and their mom's not around either. Well, one possibility is there's an older dude and maybe he has access to alcohol. I don't know what the situation was like there, but if they want to drink alcohol, then maybe Vincent can kind of get them some. The point is, you can imagine these youngsters and Vincent van Gogh kind of getting up to sort of no good in a way. Whatever you define as no good, it's kind of the mischief of youngish people, or the kind of mischief young people get on when parents aren't around. What do you think that can involve? And what do you think Van Gogh, fresh out of the asylum, what do you think he thinks of his newfound freedom, not just in Orvers, but suddenly given complete access to a doctor's household? Given this context of the doc not being around, at the bottom of the last paragraph of the last page of the chapter, I've scribbled the word Marguerite, ? By the way, could Dr. Geshe have mentioned wanting a second portrait to Vincent, Theo, and Joe directly? I just want to play devil's advocate with this. You might say, it just doesn't make sense. He wouldn't mention it in a letter. Well, is the reason it's not mentioned because Dr. Gashay spoke about it directly? Is that why it's simply not mentioned in any of the letters? What do you guys think? Let's hear your thoughts on that. Stephanie says, I think he had an apartment there. I don't know that for a fact, but it's definitely a question. If he wasn't sleeping there, then I think it would make this idea of when the cat's away, the mouse will play even more kind of interesting. Because then you'd know, it's not like he's gone for the day, but he'll be back at 6 o'clock this evening. It's like, well, we're not going to see him for 3 days. Totally different ball game kind of thing. Robbie says, did they have a chaperone? I think they may have. There was a housekeeper. That's quite a good point. I'm not quite sure what her name is, but there was a housekeeper there who I think was effectively the chaperone. So let me ask you guys again. Do you think Dr. Gashay may have mentioned wanting a second portrait verbally, directly to Vincent or Theo and Joe directly? And is that why it's simply not mentioned in any of the letters? Stephanie says, I think Vincent and Theo would have written about it if Dr. Gashay asked in person. It would be good for both of them. I absolutely agree with that. I think they would have discussed it. They would have said, they definitely would have said something. Something that they could have said is, you know what, Dr. Gashay, I'm going to do him this favor, but he really needs to do us a favor. He needs to come back to the gallery and sing your praises a bit, So that is my spiel. I hope I've convinced you guys, especially, at the beginning of this live stream, I was saying about this tire, and you may have gotten the sense of, wow, how did that happen? And it's like this blank, like, how did that happen? If you ever have that feeling again, like in true crime, did somebody just shoot somebody? Was it just like random? Nothing is random. So remember that there are systems going on all the time with the things that happen inevitably with everything, but especially with true crime. Stephanie says, good for Theo's business, good for Vincent's career. Okay. Where's my dog? Timmy? Okay. For those who are reading The Murder of Vincent van Gogh, for those of you reading my book, it's not quite as big as this. Remember, if you leave a review, good, bad, or ugly, I'll be happy to repeat it here. Let's just see if there are any reviews here. I think I'm on 22 reviews. Sorry about this. I'll be with you guys in a moment. Yeah, there are 22 reviews. It's quite well reviewed. It's got a rating of 4.5 out of 5, which is pretty much the top end of all the ratings of most of my books. I'll put a link to that in the description, in the comments. Paddy says, buying your book tonight. Paddy, I do recommend you buy the Kindle version, the paperback. There is a paperback version, but the text is quite small. I'm also going to put a link to a Vanity Fair article about whether Van Gogh was murdered. Rutger says not reviewed yet. I hope you're going to review it, Rutger. I'd love to read it out in the next. We actually got a bit of a thin program for the next episode, so a review would be perfect for that. Remember, in the next live stream, it's going to be a StreamYard with Stephanie, and Stephanie is going to share some of her notes. I must say what Stephanie's shared just in this live stream has been really worthwhile. So thanks a lot for that, Stephanie. Then I'm going to also put a link to a Martin Bailey article from the Art newspaper. It's from around about the time that I went to Orvez. It's from 2019, and it gives 10 reasons why the murder story is a myth. So it's his assertion that it's definitely suicide. It's his defense of the mainstream narrative. So I'm going to put a link to that, and you can check it out. Bear in mind, all of these episodes are scripted. I sort of do research. I provide photos of my trip to Orvez in the script, and I post the script onto Patreon. So if you're interested in following it, it really is worth reading the script and looking at the photos. You can join Patreon for $1 a month, and also interact with the people who are here there if you're interested. Obviously, there's a lot of other content on Patreon as well. Nisi says, thank you, Nick. Stimulating as always. I'm enjoying your book. We'll review soon. Well, so it looks like there are at least 2 reviews that I can count on. That's good that's something to look forward to for sure. Okay, so we are probably going to do the next live stream on Van Gogh next Sunday, around about this time. So around about 3 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's 1 o'clock in the morning where I am now. I really need to go to bed. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose of what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to bid you guys adieu. I'm going to try and make the episodes going from here an hour shorter. So not 3, this one's almost 3 hours long. We're going to need to try and keep it to 2 hours. So Stephanie, bear that in mind. Yeah. Okay. I hope we're going to pull off the StreamYard thing without a hitch. I don't even know if I'm still like subscribed to it. I think I am, but it's not that complicated. Stephanie says thumbs up for TCRS. Thanks, guys. Karina says bed sounds lovely. Karina's in Austria, so it's also probably about 1 o'clock in the morning there. So anyway, thanks to you guys for joining me at such short notice. I think there are going to be some members who are a bit perturbed because they may have missed this opportunity. But they can obviously catch the live. I might give them some extra interaction when we do the next live. Stephanie says that's good for me with family time. Patty says looking forward to the next episode. Thank you, Nick, Stephanie, and Bria, and all you wonderful members. Okay, so I just want to thank the new members who are here. Nisi is definitely one of them. And then also thanks to the mods who made it. Very short notice again. Also thanks for the super chats. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to having Stephanie on. I'm going to try not to interrupt her. I know I can sometimes get quite excited, so I'm going to try and not interrupt her. And I really don't mind if I'm interrupted where someone's trying to make an important point. Sometimes you do need to stop someone and say, yeah, I actually agree with that. And it's not rude or whatever, but it is a little bit complicated with StreamYard because there's a delay. So sometimes you don't realize someone's talking when the sound comes through, whatever, but just bear that in mind. Stephanie says, I think Dr. Geshe was benefiting from private lessons in observing Vincent's painting process. So I think on the one hand, Dr. Gashay is getting the benefit of these private lessons. I think on the other hand, Vincent's getting some private joy out of his odd encounter with Marguerite. Just a hunch. Stephanie says, we just get excited to share. That is exactly it. Yeah, Bria's also done a StreamYard. I think when you sitting on the other side, it may seem like, wow, I don't know why you can't just let the other person speak, but it's a little bit fuzzy when you're actually doing it. It's not like three people in a room. There are delays that are a little bit difficult and complicated. Anyway, that is it. We at 3 hours. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you to my voice for standing up to that as well. I'm going to try and put up the episode about why the one Gashay is fake between now and the next episode 6. So look out for that, guys. This group is understanding, yeah. Radka says, have a good sleep, all insomniacs too, including me. Well, you can always use this, play it back a second time as ASMR. Just turn the volume down a little bit. Bria says, thank you so much for this time. Thanks to all of you, and have a good rest of your Sunday. See you next Sunday. Ciao.